This is a Leadify podcast.
Welcome to Real Leaders, the podcast that brings leadership lessons to life by analyzing characters from movies and shows that you love. In each episode, we'll explore what their fictional leadership styles can teach us about real-world relationships.
We'll unpack the qualities that make these characters stand out as we evaluate their decisions, strengths, flaws, and how they inspire, or sometimes fail, the people around them. So whether you're a leader yourself or just a fan of great storytelling, grab your popcorn and join us as we explore the real leaders that have captivated our minds and hearts on screen.
Welcome to another episode of Real Leaders with Dan Glaser and April Hennessey. So today we're talking about WALL-E, the 2008 Disney Pixar film. And I know what you might be thinking, another Disney movie? Is this a Disney podcast? And no, it's not. It just happens to be the first two movies that we really had a lot of energy around and wanted to talk about. What was interesting for me was I walked into this movie and I was really excited to watch it and kind of see what leadership perspectives I could get out of it. Because honestly, when I went into this, I really wasn't sure what to expect. I mean, the first half of the movie's kind of a silent film with, you know, the little robot on a completely abandoned planet, just cleaning up the trash. So April, I know you've spent quite a bit of time in the WALL-E universe. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So first of all, it was one of my son's absolute favorite movies when he was little. So we watched it almost every day for a long time. But then I actually taught it for high schoolers as well. There's a lot of cool themes there that can be explored, just themes of resistance, of camaraderie, teamwork. I think you're going to talk a little bit about inclusion and the way that resonated for you. But before we get into all of that, I just want to give our listeners a little bit of a background, a quick summary. So when we enter the film, we essentially find this little tiny robot named WALL-E who is collecting all the trash around essentially desolate and devastated planet Earth. You see that the only thing left remaining, and this is a kind of indicator of the wasteland of Earth, is his tiny friend, little cockroach. And on the other hand, all of the people who once occupied the planet are now aboard this giant ship called the Axiom. It's the collision of these two worlds that really brings most of the action in the film, especially WALL-E's introduction to another robot named Eve. So WALL-E, just for people listening, is the waste allocation load lifter, Earth class, and Eve, his buddy, who we'll learn more about later, is the extraterrestrial vegetation evaluator, which is a very important point that we can talk about in just a moment.
Yeah, I could really use a WALL-E around my house to pick up the garbage, honestly.
Right? My gosh, can you imagine? Or like a WALL-E to essentially pick up all the pet hair? Although that's kind of what these RoboVacs are, right? Like, yeah. I do have one of those, so we're getting there.
You know, I'm probably going to rename my Roomba to WALL-E.
Mine is called Stegosaurus Rex, and the one with the mop is called Socosaurus Rex.
I like it.
Yeah, those are my two little Roombas. I love them.
So, as he mentioned, I wasn't sure what leadership qualities I was going to see going into this movie. You know, I'd seen it a long time ago, so it was fun to revisit. And so I'm thinking, you know, he's alone on this planet. You know, he's doing the one thing he's created for. Well, he's doing a few other things. He's having fun with it. You know, it's kind of a silent film for the first half. And so I wasn't sure, you know, how much leadership qualities you're going to get when you're kind of by yourself on a planet. Is it a self-leadership? You know, is he just how to keep motivated? But what popped up for me, and you mentioned it before, was kind of the story of clashing cultures, you know, where WALL-E has been on Earth and goes onto the spaceship for all these humans who hadn't been on Earth in a very long time. And actually, I don't think anyone had ever been there because they were, you know, it's been a few generations.
Yep.
And so it's kind of reintroducing their own culture to them, which was interesting to me. But it was a foreign culture nonetheless. I mean, when you kind of think about that, you know, we're all humans on one planet and we have a lot of different cultures. So
the foreign culture point is a great one because actually I think that when he gets on the robot when he gets on the Axiom, the ship, and there are the little cleaner robots who go and scan and make sure that, you know, he actually recognizes foreign contaminant. Like WALL-E is a foreign contaminant, right? So talking about clashing of cultures and the sort of outsider narrative, WALL-E is labeled a foreign contaminant, right? Because he's not clean. He's dirty.
Quite literally foreign. Dirt
and all of the stuff from Earth. So foreign contaminant. That's what we hear.
With little Mo. I love that little robot.
Little Mo. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and the other thing he does too, when he kind of gets on the spaceship and starts seeing all these robots, and he's not alone anymore, is he shakes the hand of like one of the robots. a whole foreign concept to them too. They're like, again, it kind of became a thing throughout the film that other kind of people kind of picked up on of, different greetings and, he reintroduces music and all that other kind of stuff.
Well, let me piggyback off the point that you made and back up for a minute. So it's like you were talking about how Wall-E reintroduces all of these sort of different aspects of human culture to the people on the ship who are in fact human and Wall-E isn't. And I want to talk about why that is for a minute because I think it's really important. So what we see in the movie is that all of these robots, Eve, Mo, and all of the other robots on the ship are, for the most part, following what they continually call their directive, right? They are programmed to do certain behaviors or certain tasks, and they do those things, and that's it, right? Eve is on Earth looking for signs of plant life because that's her directive. That's what she's programmed to do. They want to find land that is habitable again, and so they send out these robots to look for signs of life. But the interesting thing about Wall-E is that he's evolved beyond his programming. And so when we meet Wall-E, we see that he's still doing his trash compacting duties as he is programmed. But he takes these little side quests, right? Like he finds all of these things that he just thinks are interesting. And he's built himself a little home. He manages to stay around when all of the robots have ceased to be because he uses their spare parts to fix himself. And he collects these like treasures. He has no idea what they are. They're so random and we see them. But one of the things that he collects is a plant that Eve will eventually find growing in a shoe. But one of the other things that he collects that becomes a kind of a grounding point for him across the movie and that Eve eventually learns from as well is this movie, right? And he learns about humans and human behavior through that movie. He learns about dancing, about love, about holding hands, about singing. He's got all of this kind of knowledge of humans and their behaviors from the items that they left behind and from this movie, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting that he collects the plant because it was a curiosity.
Right. Exactly. Didn't mean anything to him. It's not important to him in any other way other than it was interesting, Now,
can I rewind for 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it was something I noticed when I was watching the movie. So Eve, her whole purpose was to go and find habitable life.
Yep.
And find the plant. So I thought it was curious that when she gets to Earth and she's doing the scan, the first thing that moved, she tried to blow it up. I don't know what directive they're trying to program into her, but if you're looking for life and if something moves and you try to kill it, I'm not sure if that's the right programming.
But her programming is extraterrestrial vegetation evaluator, right? So the cockroach wasn't vegetation. But yeah, you would think, hey, if something's alive here, then that's already a good sign, right? Yeah, we don't blow that up.
Plasma cannon was absolutely necessary.
That's such a funny observation. I never even thought about that. But it just goes to show how intensely she adheres to her directive. So this is why when Wall-E finally gets aboard the spaceship, it kind of creates chaos because he deviates and forces others to deviate from their objective from the moment he enters. So when Mo recognizes him as a foreign contaminant, Wall-E just runs away, right? Yeah. And what does Wall-E do? Sorry, Mo. Mo has to decide, does he stay on his line that he's been programmed to, follow? Or does he hop off of his programmed path and follow the tread marks that Wall-E's making all over and clean them up? In the end, Mo deviates from his objective, right? He gets off the path to go clean up the tread marks. That is the first of many, many moments when Wall-E creates or catalyzes others to deviate from their objective.
And that wasn't his plan.
No,
he didn't really have a plan. He's just doing his thing. He's living his life. His whole goal in all this is, I think, just to connect with Eve.
Right, exactly.
He didn't mean to start a whole culture war.
No, absolutely not. But yeah, I think we see that. And it becomes really important to the film because other robots begin to understand, and not just robots, but the captain and the other individuals on the ship who begin to take off their blinders or their sort of video screens to connect with one another. It starts a whole entire resistance and revolution.
Yeah. And I think that was interesting, the captain's take on it. And this is why I kind of came back to the inclusion piece for me, was how he responded to Wall-E and the foreign concept, which was curiosity. Love that whole line in there where he asked the computer, define Earth, define music, what is dancing? Like, he really had to kind of rediscover the whole culture because of Wall-E.
Yep. So fascinating. So as we think about the leadership qualities, I mean, in many ways, Wall-E is this unintentional leader. What he knows, though, is that there are these important things outside of just the directive that he's been given, right? These flashes of curiosity, these moments of joy, this, desire to connect with Eve. These things are as important and compelling to him as the directive he's been given. And for Eve in the beginning, who's, they're essentially sidekicks in this whole thing, she resists that at first. Until she starts to understand that the directive she's been given, which is to bring this plant and demonstrate that Earth is now habitable, right, gets tossed in the trash by another robot. So essentially her directive is overridden by another robot who decides, no, I don't care if that's your directive. We're not doing this thing anymore. We're staying in the air. Because Otto, his job is to basically keep people safe and fly on this course. And he'd been given alternate commands to stay the course, right? So he's not going to let us go back, or us, humans, go back to Earth. Right. And that's a turning point for Eve because she's like, wait a minute, though. What does that mean about my directive?
Right. And it's kind of interesting to have robots with opposing directives trying to work it out.
Oh my gosh. But isn't that really the case in so many organizations where people are working at odds, or they have competing priorities, or, and you have this clash or this tension between groups or departments or whatever, because everybody has their priority that they've been told is a priority. And they're not always in sync with other priorities. Right? So I think that's actually a really interesting reflection of the way that things sometimes really do happen in workplaces.
Yeah, I've been given conflicting priorities before.
I mean, we all have, right? And I don't think it happens.
It was budget for some reason.
Yeah, it does.
Doing more with less. Who's ever been told that?
Yep, for sure. So, we see here is Wall-E is this kind of unintentional instigator or catalyst for other robots to begin to deviate from their directives. Yeah. And he's passive in it. He doesn't necessarily want to be a troublemaker. It's very clear that Wall-E doesn't like trouble and chaos, right? But on the other hand, we have Eve, who I think is a very different kind of leader. She is definitely leading a resistance. And I don't know, do you want to talk more about how she does that?
Well, what's interesting to me was the concept of the rogue robot was a big one for me in there.
Yep.
It was kind of like these group of robots who didn't conform or didn't fit, or, they thought were malfunctioning.
Yep.
So they kind of put them all together in a kind of an oscillation. And the concept of the rogue robot was evil. And so, when things started going astray, they use propaganda and these horrible pictures, with rogue robots on the loose, beware, And so that was their way of trying, I think, to control or regain control of the situation. So, I just thought that was interesting that, how they could put an unlikely group together, but they all kind of had their own value in a way towards the end, each rogue robot fulfilled a role in the success of the mission.
Well, and I think what we have here is individuals or robots, right, who are labeled as other in some way because of whether it's a malfunction or they deviated from their directive or whatever it might be. So I think, they were sort of the disruptors who helped people see beyond their blinders, beyond the status quo, right? And so thinking about John and Mary, that couple in the chairs who are oh, hey, it's Wall-E. We know Wall-E, right? And they take off their viewers that they're wearing, right? And they actually see each other for the first time. And John kind of puts his hand on Mary's hand, there's human connection and relationship building happening there. It is necessary for all of these people to kind of be disrupted and woken up from their passive state in order to help accomplish the task, which is to really return the humans to the place that they belong, Earth, right?
Yeah, the whole scene where the view screen comes down like, oh, I didn't know we had a pool.
I know. You've been here for how many hundreds of years and you didn't know there was a pool? Yeah. I mean, it's that level of not seeing. And I think it correlates in a lot of ways to our workplaces, that sometimes we see people as misfits or rogue robots. And we're like, oh gosh, they're always stirring the pot or they're always resisting. And I think this gets back to your inclusion narrative, which is that it's so necessary for people to disrupt the status quo and say, hey, what's going on here isn't cool. You know, like we can't just label people like this and throw them in a pen over there and keep them out of eyesight because we don't like who they are or we don't like what they say or we don't like, you know, and I think that is part of this inclusion narrative, that it's very important to have to disrupt or to disrupt.
And to take a look at a different perspective and change the status quo or the daily routine and take a look around. Because you never know what you might see.
Exactly. And so I think ultimately even Wally enable that, right? Wally starts this thing and Eve picks up on it. And in order to do the right thing, she realizes that even she's going to have to deviate from her directive. And I think that this is an important lesson if we're thinking about leadership, right? Because in some ways we're like, oh, you're supposed to do what you're told. Like you have a job, you go in, you do the thing. You know, I'm not encouraging us all to go into our workplaces and just start disrupting and destroying sort of all the things that we need to keep things moving smoothly. But I am encouraging us to consider that sometimes it does really take someone to deviate from their directive in order to do the right thing. Yeah. You know?
And sometimes a rogue robot just might be a person in the wrong role and there's a better space for them.
Oh, I love that. They're in the wrong role, or maybe the role isn't fitting because there are other things, or maybe they don't have what they need to do the role. And so they're kind of clamoring and making some noise and things aren't running smoothly, you know?
Well, so play to your strengths.
Exactly. And I think, you know, sometimes when people are sort of disrupting, it's because they don't have what they need. Either they don't have the direction that they need or the support that they need or the skills or whatever it is, right?
I like that.
So as we close out today, I mean, we've kind of been all over the place talking about Wally and Eve. I mean, there's so much in this movie, but I do think that the things that stand out to me are that sometimes a single person can cause enormous change in an organization, right? And yes, Wally and Eve had a whole host of support and help from the captain, from the people who lived on the ship to the other robots on the ship and so on and so forth. But if not for Wally, I think things on the Axiom would have continued to go along just as it had, right? And so when we think about leadership and we think about how Wally leads, I think first he was a self-leader. He is a self-leader, right? He leads himself. He does his job. But he also, what he didn't forget is that there's so many things to discover and so many things that we can sort of find to make us better at what we do, right? Wally persists and continues to clean up the trash because he was willing to go outside of his directive and start using other parts to fix himself. And so like part of it is like that thing about assume constraints, like what we think we're constrained by, sometimes we have to find creative solutions around. I think that's one. And two, to be willing to be different, to be willing to be a disruptor in some ways, you know, to not follow the status quo, I think is kind of a healthy lesson here too.
Yes. Yeah. And we have talked about a lot today. There's a lot we can discuss. We'd like to hear from you about what you thought of Wally if you've watched the movie. What lessons did you take away? We'd also really like to hear from you what other movies and characters you'd like to see us cover or would you like to discuss?
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on the episode of Real Leaders. We hope you enjoyed exploring leadership lessons through the lens of our characters today. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, share, and drop us a review. It really helps.
Do you have a movie or character you'd like to discuss? Leave us a comment or connect with us on Instagram at Real Leaders, that's REEL Leaders, and join the conversation. Until then, keep looking for leadership lessons in the stories you love, and we'll catch you in the next episode.